I wanted to find out if this small macro lens attachment that can easily be paired with a smartphone can compete with a full frame camera and a real macro lens, which both together are several times more expensive than the iPhone setup. The results to my tests are quite surprising. A disclosure, Sandmarc was kind enough to send me this lens for testing free of charge. However, they are not paying me to make this video, they don't get to review it before I upload, and the opinions in this video are my own. Let's jump straight into the comparisons, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the Sandmarc Macro Lens in more detail later in this video. This is photo from camera A, and this is camera B. I did shoot these photos in RAW, so I have tweaked them a little in Lightroom to get them to look moderately similar. If you guessed camera B was my Nikon D780, you would be incorrect. I see my lighting was a little bit off, but I think the iPhone and macro lens attachment show a lot of detail and texture. They don't look the exact same, but I'm pretty impressed. Next photo is of a very useful quick release that I reviewed in my last video. I also used my slider to get a video for this one. Camera A photo, camera A video, camera B photo, camera B video. I love getting macro shots for product related videos. The details you can get are always so fun to get creative with. In this case, camera B was once again the iPhone. It's not perfect, and there are some common themes that I started to notice after reviewing these, but I will go over those details later. Next is a good old macro flower picture. Camera A and camera B. This is probably one of the hardest ones to tell apart. In this case, camera A is the same as camera B, both the D780. Just kidding. Camera A is the iPhone. Let me know in the comments below if you believe me even just for a second. They do look very similar though. Another flower pic. Camera A and camera B. I think by now most people should be picking up on the differences between how these two lenses look. Camera A is the D780. Second last subject is another photo and video of a product. A variable ND that I also made a video on comparing ND filter strengths in different lighting and shooting conditions. Camera A photo, camera A video, and camera B photo, camera B video. Camera A is the iPhone. And the last case study is one last flower shot. Camera A, camera B. Camera A is the iPhone once again. I don't think anyone would argue that the iPhone for a lot of cases will be good enough, especially for social media and YouTube. It still lets you get in tight and close to capture those finer details and textures that only a macro lens can do. As a quick reference, this is the closest you can get to a subject with the iPhone XR with no lens, about 3.25 inches. And this is how some of the subjects from before look like at minimum focusing distance of the stock iPhone lens. This is how close you can get with the macro lens, just over half an inch. So overall, I think this lens is pretty cool. Almost everyone already has a phone in the pocket, so being able to pick this relatively inexpensive attachment that costs $90 US and start recording and shooting macro is great. For comparison, that 90mm Tamron costs over 8 times more at $750. On the top of that, you need to buy an expensive camera to put that lens on. The Sandmarc lens itself has a nice weight, feels good in the hand, and doesn't feel cheap. It has an aluminum housing, and Sandmarc states it has premium multi-coated lens elements inside, which I'm inclined to believe. I couldn't see any obvious edge distortion or aberration. The macro lens provides a 10 times magnification versus the stock lens, and I would say it's around a 30mm equivalent. The lens package comes with a specific case with aluminum threading for the lens to screw onto, as well as a lens clip that can be used instead if you don't want to use the supplied case, although it's not as exact or sturdy as the case is. Sandmarc did also send me an additional case that you can buy separately that is arguably more premium than the case that is provided with the lens. The stock case is just a hard plastic that has less coverage around the phone. The separate case is made with a softer and grippier material and a microfiber lining and metal buttons. I personally like this case more, but it's not completely necessary. One cool thing about these are that all the lenses Sandmarc makes can be screwed into this thread size, so if you buy some of their other lenses, you won't need to change cases. The last few items included in the package are a pouch, front and back lens caps, a cloth, and this lens hood. It's meant to be a guide for focus. If you have the subject against the hood, your camera should be in focus range. On the subject of the lens hood, it's time to move on to the negatives of this lens. For one, my lens hood wouldn't fit on the lens at first. However, after forcefully pushing and twisting onto the lens for quite some time, it seemed to have finally loosened up. It is only held on by friction, and if it was threaded, it would be more easier to install on the lens. Another thing about the lens hood is that you can actually get a little closer than the width of the hood. I was using a camera app that let me manually set the focus, which let me confirm the minimum focusing distance, so it would have been nice for the hood to be a little bit shallower if it's meant to be a guide. But the trade-off of getting closer and maximizing the magnification of the lens is the phone blocking light from hitting the subject. This is one of the things that could be seen in the pictures. Most of the iPhone photos were quite a bit darker at the bottom of the frame. As I said, it's a 30mm lens equivalent, while most macros are 50 or 90mm. The tighter the focal length, the farther you can get from your subject and still fill the frame. Here's how the minimum focusing distance is on the 90mm Tamron, which still lets you get a tight macro shot. This distance is nice to have, especially if your subjects are bugs. Another negative about the lens is the maximum focusing distance. Unlike a real macro that can focus really close to the subject, as well as all the way out to infinity, the maximum focusing distance of this lens is about 1 inch. So the working distance of the lens is between half an inch and an inch. And if you need to capture anything farther, the lens has to come off, which can be inconvenient to screw the lens on and off over and over again depending on what you're shooting. And lastly is that you obviously don't have the same kind of control over your phone and videos using a smartphone compared to a camera. The app I was using was handy to manually set some camera settings, but you can't manually change everything, including the aperture to naturally manipulate how much light came in or the depth of field. And depth of field may be another thing that you picked up on in the photos. My camera setup just had a much thinner and razor sharp plane of focus, with the background being quite a bit blurrier. Although I will admit that you still get quite a bit of background blur with the macro lens attachment, that out of focus isolation is something most smartphones have a hard time doing naturally. But because of the physics of lenses, the closer you are to the subject with your lens, the thinner the plane of focus is. And there really isn't a lot of distance left to get closer with this macro lens. So overall, I would rate this a buy. Despite its drawbacks, I would have 100% purchased one of these a few years ago when I didn't have a proper macro lens. Like I said, it's great for capturing those super fine details, which is very useful for product photography and videos. It's also a lot of fun getting huge images of small things. And if you don't have a proper camera or a specific macro lens, this Sandmarc Macro Lens is a great option. I will leave a link below to Sandmarc's website. It is an affiliate link, so if you use it and purchase a product, I will make a small commission at no additional cost to you, which is always greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.